Alright guys, thanks for tuning in to the nightthawkk channel. Tonight's story was submitted to me by my first subscriber, Bloody Wolf. She's out in New York City, so just send in a shout out to Bloody Wolf. I really appreciate the love of submitting the story. And to all you other listeners out there, if you'd like me to upload your story, please submit to the email below and I'll try to have that up within the next 24 hours. Okay, with that said, let's get on to the story. And remember,
have been granted immunity from the purge and shall not be harmed. Commencing at the siren, any...
this world is a strange one, but I don't know anywhere more strange than living out in the middle of nowhere on a farm. I grew up as an army brat, so I've been a lot of different places, seen a lot of different things. During my travels, I would hear about the horror stories of the ROTC members camping out in the middle of the woods, or visiting old military bases shut down. But I have yet had the chance to experience being out in the middle of nowhere, miles away from your next door neighbor, surrounded by pigs, cows, and chickens, and corn so tall, if you got lost in the field, you could spend hours, or even days before you find your way out. This story I would like to share comes from my friend Casey, or better yet known as Bloody Wolf. Growing up in Shango, New York, was a place filled with culture and hardworking people. I grew up a few miles outside of town on my grandparents' farm. We would spend days playing outside in the barns, riding four-wheelers, fishing. We had all the adventures a kid could ever imagine. But at night, things would change. The animals would rest peacefully in the fields. We would listen to the trees blow and sway in the wind. Sounds of crickets and toads, barely louder than the wind itself. Our farm was built back in the 70s, so the barn was old. It was filled with Grandpa's tools and tractors, saws, pitchforks, shovels, and behind the barn there was gray and red square stones buried in the ground. Grandpa would always tell us that's where the cats go after they eat sick mice. Me and my cousins would run around all day, Grandma looking after us out the window. She would always tell us, "Don't cross that fence line or the scarecrow, he'll get ya." We would giggle and run up to the fence line and dare each other to put our hand or foot across the line and run away when we hear strange noises rattling in the tall corn. I love being on the farm. There's no other place in the world I'd rather be until one night early in September. Me and my cousins were having a sleepover. We were all upstairs in my bedroom telling ghost stories. It was me, my cousin Sarah, Joe, and Kate. We were all sitting around in a circle and taking turns adding our own lines in the ghost story, and whoever made up the best lines would win the top bunk for the night. It was Joe's turn, and I was sitting there halfway listening and trying to think of what I could say to add to the story so that I could be better and win. I didn't want to sleep on the bottom bunk, nor sleep in a sleeping bag on the floor. As Joe dimmed his light on his flashlight, the room got dark. I mean really dark, darker than usual. He placed the flashlight underneath his face and began. As he was talking, out of the corner of my eyes, I could see a shadow figure walking underneath the crack of the bedroom door, but I didn't think anything of it. Maybe it's just Grandpa headed to bed. I tried focusing on what Joe was saying, but I really wanted my part of the story to be scary as possible. Joe, being the oldest, always had say in who had the best lines at the end, which I know is not fair at all. His voice begins to lower, and the bedroom door cracks open, just enough to catch everyone's attention. We all freeze. "Grandma? Grandpa? Is that you?" No answer, and Joe shines the flashlight over in the direction of the door, but there's no one there. Maybe it's just a draft from downstairs. Grandma always leaves the windows open so that it cools down the rooms upstairs. Just as Joe's about to start back into his story, we can hear Grandma downstairs telling us it's time for bed. Wait, that's no fair. I didn't even get a chance. Joe laughs as he crawls into the top bunk, of course. Just not fair, I'm sitting there thinking to myself as I tuck myself down into my sleeping bag. I lay there for about an hour, just staring at the ceiling, when I notice a shadow figure passing the door again. I sit up and look over at my cousin Kate. She's sound asleep, and Sarah laying on the bottom bunk. This sucks, hard wooden floors, and I just can't get comfortable. As I begin to fluff my pillow, I hear the door crack and slowly begin to open. I lay down back quickly. I roll over to my side so that my back is to the door. I pulled my blanket over my head and I closed my eyes and tucked myself deep down in my sleeping bag. I lay there for about 10 minutes, listening carefully. Maybe it's just the wind again. I roll over to my back and the door is completely shut now. I didn't even hear it close. That's odd. As I lay there thinking about the stupid ghost stories, I begin to feel something moving around my feet. At first, it felt like maybe it's a mouse. We did get mice in the house sometimes. I flicker my feet around to see if that'll make it stop, but it doesn't. It moves up to my knees, then to my thighs. I lift my head up and look down, and there I see, slowly creeping up my leg, is a black hand, or at least it looks like a hand. My eyes are still adjusting to the darkness. I feel it beginning to pull on my blanket. Now it's on my chest. I let out a loud scream, and Kate and Sarah sit up and start screaming too. No more than 10 seconds, Grandpa burst into the room. "What's going on here?" Sarah says, "I was having a nightmare that something was crawling up my chest." Kate says, "Me too." "Have you kids been up here telling these stupid ghost stories again?" "No way," Grandpa Joe says. "The girls were all asleep." I just crawled back into bed. I went downstairs to get a glass of water. I swear, as I looked at Joe's face and his expressions, I could tell he was being honest. "I wasn't asleep, I tell you, Grandpa." "Yes, you were. All three of you were asleep," Joe claims. "I didn't go asleep until I figured, or I knew that all of you guys were asleep. Me being the oldest, I didn't want someone up by themselves." Was I asleep? Was it a dream? Did all three of us just have the same dream? The next morning I woke up and everyone had already went downstairs for breakfast. As I sit there thinking to myself, was that a dream? Did I just make it all up? And I look down at the end of my sleeping bag and I see what looks like to be the remains of 5 finger streaks